You ever heard someone describe the Vikings like they were sweaty, muddy barbarians who never bathed, brushed, or bothered with anything that didn't involve setting a village on fire? Yeah, that image has been living rent-free in most of our brains, thanks to Hollywood and maybe a few too many video games. But let me tell you something, those so-called savages, they were cleaner than the people who wrote the history books about them. I'm not even joking. While medieval monks were out there wearing the same wool robes for 3 years straight and claiming that cleanliness was next to sinfulness, Vikings were soaking in hot springs, combing their luscious golden manes, and even using ear spoons. Yes, tiny spoons for earwax. We're going full Mythbusters mode today because the truth about Viking hygiene, it's stranger, cooler, and somehow squeakier than fiction. So how did these Norse warriors stay fresh without the luxury of Dove body wash, Oral-B toothbrushes, or scented candles? And why did their enemies complain that they were too clean and too good-looking? You're about to find out. From bath days and beard combs to homemade shampoo and herbal breath fixes, this is how the Vikings stayed clean. Without modern soap, but with a whole lot of style. Let's scrub off the grime of myths and dive into the surprisingly fresh world of Viking hygiene. You'd think a guy who spends half his week on a longship raiding monasteries wouldn't care much about how clean his fingernails were. But you'd be very, very wrong. Cleanliness to a Viking wasn't just about comfort. It was about pride, honor, and, let's be honest, getting the girl. These were people who took their grooming seriously. Not just, I'll comb my beard before dinner seriously. More like, I'll bury myself with my grooming kit so I'm fresh in the afterlife, seriously. And it wasn't just men. Women too had intricate grooming rituals, beautiful combs and tweezers that were so well crafted, they looked like something you'd find in a high-end skincare kit today. Archaeologists have found bone and antler grooming tools buried alongside Viking remains like prized possessions. You don't bury what you don't care about. These were essentials. Even their enemies noticed. Anglo-Saxon monks used to complain in writing that Viking men washed too often, dressed too well, and stole all the local women because of it. I mean, imagine you're a monk writing in your dusty old scroll and you're out here fuming because some Norse guy rolled up with clean hair, perfect braids, and smelled like pine needles while you're still drying your robe from the last thunderstorm. That's the kind of petty historical drama I live for. So no, these people weren't the swamp-dwelling mud monsters you see in gritty TV shows. They were clean, ridiculously clean for their time. And for Vikings, that cleanliness wasn't vanity. It was status, it was survival, it was Viking. So let's talk about bath day, because for the Vikings, this wasn't just scrubbing dirt off your elbows. It was a ritual, a community reset, and it happened on the same day, every single week. That's right, Saturday, or as they called it, Laugardagur, literally washing day. While other medieval cultures might have been busy collecting plague or tossing slop out the window, the Vikings had a set day every week where they dedicated time to soak, steam, rinse, and reset. Sound familiar? That's because it's where our word Saturday actually comes from in several Nordic languages. These people were building self-care into their calendars before calendars were even a thing. Now don't picture a bubble bath with rose petals, though who knows, maybe Freya was into that. But they had a real system. Hot springs were like nature's spa, and in Iceland especially, Vikings took full advantage. If you were lucky enough to live near one, you'd be there soaking up the heat, letting nature scrub your stress away. But even without natural hot tubs, they built bathhouses, wooden structures with stone hearths where they'd heat water, pour it over themselves, and sit in the steam. It wasn't glamorous, but it was effective. And it wasn't just about getting clean. Bathing was social. It was where deals were made, gossip was shared, and warriors probably compared beard lengths. A Viking wouldn't just wash, he'd preen, inspect, and make sure every braid was tight before heading out. It was therapy, networking, grooming, and wellness all rolled into one. Now, for a group of people often painted as wild-haired raiders with axes, the Vikings were freakishly obsessed with combs. I'm serious. Archaeologists have dug up more Viking-age combs than weapons. We're talking ivory, bone, wood, you name it. They carved it, and they didn't just toss these in a drawer somewhere. No, these were carried everywhere, often in little leather pouches hanging off their belts, like some 9th century Gucci accessory. The reason? Grooming was serious business. Viking men, not just the women, were known to comb their hair and beards multiple times a day. Long hair wasn't just a style, It was a symbol of status, power, and, let's be honest, sex appeal. Having a tangled, dirty beard, that was a no-go. And lice, that was enemy number one. These combs weren't just styling tools, they were weapons in the hygiene arsenal. Vikings combed out lice and nits so aggressively, some combs even had little grooves carved in, specifically to trap the pests. Basically early Viking dandruff control with built-in pest control. And don't forget the beard oil. Okay, maybe not Moroccan argan oil in a dropper bottle, but they absolutely oiled their beards. Animal fat or fish oil mixed with herbs, something to keep it soft, shiny, and free of beard split ends. Looking good was half the battle. Whether you were meeting a chieftain or heading into war, you did it with a neatly groomed beard. Because a Viking with a messy beard? That was practically scandalous. And speaking of scandalous, let's address the elephant in the longhouse: bad breath. What did Vikings do before toothpaste, toothbrushes, and minty mouthwash? Well, as it turns out, they were way ahead of the game. Chewing sticks, or as they called them, tangrasneer, were their go-to dental tools. These weren't just random twigs picked off the ground. They'd choose specific types of wood with natural antibacterial properties, like birch or juniper, chew one end until it frayed, and use it like a toothbrush. Cavemen walked so Vikings could floss. But it didn't stop there. Vikings made rudimentary toothpicks from animal bones or metal to clean out meat and debris from between their teeth. A rotten smile wasn't just gross, it was a sign of weakness, illness, or poor discipline. And that simply wasn't the Viking way. There's even evidence they used charcoal or crushed herbs to clean their teeth. Not tasty, but effective. Imagine waking up, grabbing your birch stick, smearing on some powdered herbs, and scrubbing away while planning your next raid. That's dedication. Dental remains from Viking graves actually show less tooth decay than you'd expect. Why? They weren't guzzling sugar like modern diets. Meat, fish, grains, low sugar, high cleaning. Add in their daily stick-chewing routine, and suddenly their dental hygiene was leagues above their medieval neighbors. No wonder the Saxons thought they were irresistible. Viking breath might have actually smelled better than yours after garlic pizza. Now, let's talk about fashion, specifically clean clothes, because nothing ruins a good horned helmet vibe like smelling like fermented herring. Vikings didn't just clean themselves, they cleaned their clothes too, regularly, and they had some wild techniques to do it. First off, forget detergent. Vikings had a better idea: stale urine. Yep, they collected it in vats and let it ferment. The resulting ammonia-rich liquid, called lant, was like their version of bleach. It was a natural disinfectant, a degreaser, and yes, it smelled as bad as you think. But it worked. They'd soak their woolen tunics and linen undergarments in lant, give them a good scrub, and then rinse them in rivers or lakes. It was all part of their laundry day ritual. Practical, disgusting, effective. And they didn't just clean them, they took care of their garments. Wool was their textile of choice, especially in colder regions, and they had ways of filling their fabrics to make them last longer. Clothes were brushed, combed, repaired, and treated like assets. If you were rich, you even had someone else do the washing for you, a full-blown laundry hierarchy. Imagine some poor soul stirring a bucket of pea-soaked breeches with a stick while the village chieftain admired his fur cloak. Glamorous? Number, but the guy was sparkling clean. And the smell? Probably just part of the charm. Now here's a spicy twist. The Vikings weren't just clean, they were fragrant. That's right. In a world where most people stank like week-old broth, Vikings actually smelled kind of amazing. And they wanted it that way. Archaeologists have found tweezers, nail cleaners, and even tiny perfume containers in Viking burial sites. You don't get buried with cologne unless smelling nice was part of your vibe, right? They used herbs and natural oils, not just to clean, but to scent themselves. Think crushed lavender, juniper, sage, and wild thyme, all mixed with fats or oils and rubbed into the skin. If you ever stood next to a Viking at the mead hall, odds are he smelled like a woodland day spa. And it wasn't just about smelling good, it was about health. Many of those herbs had antimicrobial properties. Rubbing them on skin helped prevent infections, reduce body odor, and probably kept away bugs. Viking women in particular were known to brew herbal steams to cleanse the skin. Some even bathed with flower petals. Yep, like medieval influencers. Clean, combed, and casually smelling like a forest breeze, It's no wonder Viking men were popular among Anglo-Saxon women. The records literally mention this. Foreigners complained that Viking raiders stole our women. But really, can you blame them? If the choice is between a stinky knight who never bathes and a Viking who smells like pine and rosemary, well, it's not a hard choice. Even with their robust grooming routines and clever tools, the Vikings faced one big challenge: odor. Let's face it, when you're living in a world of animal hides, smoky hearths, and close quarters, things can get funky real fast. But the Norse weren't about to let that ruin their social standing. Remember, these were people who valued honor, presentation, and making a strong impression, especially when you're trying to negotiate, intimidate, or attract a potential partner. Smelling decent, that was part of the strategy. So what did they do without our shelves of scented body wash and cologne? Well, they had a few tricks up their fur-lined sleeves. One common method was using strongly scented herbs, like thyme, yarrow, and juniper. These weren't just for cooking. Vikings would crush or burn them to create aromatic smoke, which they used to freshen up clothing and even their own bodies. Think of it as a kind of early body spray. Smoky, herbal, and honestly kind of genius. They also used smoke baths, where instead of using water, they'd let the steam and smoke from a fire cleanse their skin and drive away bacteria. And while it wasn't exactly a spa day, it did help keep things tolerable, and sometimes even pleasantly fragrant. So no, the Vikings didn't stink up the fjords like some sweaty stereotype. They had an earthy, rustic hygiene game that actually worked, without ever cracking open a bottle of Irish Spring. So next time someone calls Vikings dirty barbarians, just remember, they had better hygiene than most people give them credit for. No modern soap, no fancy shampoo, but they made it work. With lye, ash, combs, cold rivers, and natural oils, they stayed clean in the wildest conditions. They groomed daily, scraped teeth with twigs, exfoliated with sand, and even cleaned their nails with carved tools. Cleanliness wasn't vanity, it was status, power, and respect. Vikings believed you showed up sharp, or not at all. And honestly, if a Viking walked into a modern locker room, they might be the freshest one there. If this glimpse into Viking cleanliness surprised you, hit that like button. Drop a comment about which hygiene hack blew your mind. Bone combs, river baths, clay paste, and if you want more mind-blowing soap-free history, subscribe and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching, and remember, stay clean, or at least clean like a Viking.